What's up, everyone? So we have this Husqvarna, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. And this is going to be a quick video on what you should not do to your mower. And more or less, it's going to be the safety of the reasons why certain things are the way they are. Now, I'm going to go over a couple bypasses and a couple things you should not do, most definitely. But this machine is probably the most dangerous I've seen in a while. Well, this year. Now let me explain. Right here should be what they call a bale. That bale has a cable. That cable runs down here. In fact, the cable is still there. And in fact, that cable works, which is even more surprising to me. However, the owner, instead of buying the correct cable, bought a cheap cable and decided to, and I've already taken the 2 screws off, wire in a kill switch with speaker wire. So that obviously is not good. And let me explain why. Some people don't like the idea of having to turn the machine on and off again and remove the bag. I get it. But the problem is this machine does not have a clutch. So when you remove the bag, the engine is still running if on this system, or if you tie the bale down or something. But the blade is still spinning because there's no clutch. It's directly attached to the shaft. And then not only do you have a face full of grass coming your way, you are opening a door to a blade spinning at 3,600 RPMs. Maybe you are in a hurry and you need to remove some clippings that got jammed up in the chute. Well, now you're putting your hand next to that blade, and that is not a safe thing to do. There's a reason why if your buy mower doesn't have a clutch, it turns off every time you let go. And that could very well just be for safety. What if you slipped? And then next thing you know, this goes off into your car. It goes down a hill, runs over a neighbor's kid's foot, you know, stuff like that. Don't do this. Really just don't do this. So, if you're going to be buying a cable, make sure it's the right one. How do you buy a cable? Well, I'm glad you asked. On every machine, unless it's been removed, there should be a sticker that has a model number. Now, I already have a video on how to buy parts, but I'll go over it real briefly. You take that model number, you go to Google, type in blah 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 model, and then the name of the company, Husqvarna model, blah 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 blah, and then parts diagram. At that point, you find the section, because they'll break it up into engine, transmission, covers, stickers, all kinds of little sections. And in that section, find the one that's usually the handle, or maybe sometimes if it's a real simple machine, they'll just have one big diagram. At that point, you find the cable, and then you look at the number that's being pointed to it. Scroll down on that website and find the number. At that point, you have the model number. You could go to Amazon, eBay, you could just buy it from the website. Parts tree, e-replacement parts, there's a couple of them. Just buy the right cable. That way you don't have to spend all day, probably, tearing this thing apart, buying a switch. In addition to that, having to rub speaker wire from your favorite set of 1970 speakers, and then still having some incredibly dangerous machine for more money than it would have been to just buy the correct cable. Maybe it's a little cheaper, I don't know, but it's a whole lot easier to install. It saves time, and time is money. So this might have been cheaper, but if you value your time, this is either the most expensive way of getting yourself into trouble, or I guess cheapest if you don't value your time. So don't do that. Other than that, everything else, you know, there's different riggeries that I've seen over the course, and this doesn't have them, but let's go ahead and go over a couple of them that are equally as stupid. On these wheels, sometimes I see like bungee cords wrapped in between them because the little adjustments are loose. That is as simple as tightening or bending back those adjustment arms. You take the wheel off, you bend it back, or maybe the bushing that's in there is worn out and you just get a new bushing. It's not that hard. That is one of them I see quite often. In addition to that, something I see too often, is people will literally just like zip tie or wire this shut, and then to cut it off, to shut it off, they just cut it off. Don't do that. That's also just as stupid as a speaker wire, except just marginally more stupid. Don't do that. It's still unsafe because you don't have access to turn it off, because technically to turn it off, all you have to do is let go in a normal system. Buy the correct cable. Something else I've seen happen, I don't know if it's about this machine, so I once got a machine and it was shaking badly. I originally thought it was a bent crank. I went through all the tests, crank was fine. I looked at the blade, and the blade, no matter what I did, couldn't be balanced. And I noticed they took a 22-inch blade and they cut off the sides unevenly, which caused the blade to be out of balance and it's wobbling. Not only is that bad for your machine, it's just a bad idea in general. Buy the correct size of blade. Don't do that. Something that's potentially even worse is I saw one that they hit a stump and somehow, I'm assuming, the blade started to crack because it got hit. They pounded that blade back down and then they welded on there. Don't do that. If you hit a stump and you bend your blade, throw that away. That is now trash. You can practice your welds on there, but you shouldn't be welding it for any type of structural anything. Don't do that. People out there, I've done that 1,000 times, and my blade right now has welds on it. Don't do that. Blades are cheap. You can buy a new blade for this machine for like $14. You don't have to worry about it coming apart. You don't have to worry about your shoddy welding skills coming apart. You don't have to worry about you're also lazy and you didn't even bother to clean the blade. So don't do that. So we'll just leave that blade. If it's not in good condition, buy a new one. That's all you need to do. Big pet peeve of mine is when these break and then people just put a nut on it. Well, that's not bad. It does its job. It's really inconvenient. Don't do that. Go and get the actual piece. Any hardware store will have them. Go to your lawn and garden area and they will have these pieces. And buy two if you want so the opposing end is matched. That's a pet peeve. That's not really dangerous, but it is something I want to bring up. So, and one of the very few things I want to discuss about the fuel system is I once had someone bring me a machine and the fuel literally looked like it was runny oil. And it smelled like oil, it looked like oil, but it smelled like fuel too. He ran into the predicament of his local facility that takes old engine oil was closing, never had it open, so he had 5 quarts of oil chilling there, didn't know what to do, so he put a little bit of oil in his tank. He said he can get up to about 50 to 1, or 50%, excuse me, before it started to run poorly. And then one day he started to wonder why he was losing compression. There was literally so much carbon being built up in the combustion chamber, started to break off and scrape the sides of the piston wall. Don't do that. Fuel should remain fuel. Don't try to burn your own oil. Don't do anything like that. Just find a different way. All you're going to be doing is having to buy a new engine in the future or a whole new machine. And then what happens? Then you have to buy a whole new machine. You could go to your local auto parts store and they usually get rid of oil. Maybe you go to town for once and you go and do that. Whatever the case is, don't put oil in your gasoline. And that's pretty much the majority of the ones that really, grind my gears. But I really just want to point this out that this is a very useful tool. It could also be a very dangerous machine. If something breaks, buy the correct part. It's maybe more expensive, but buy the correct part. Don't go through the rabbit hole of having line everywhere, because what happens to that little line that we wind up? It gets rusty and then you cut yourself. Now you have to go get a tetanus shot. Don't do that. Buy the correct materials. If you need a cable, buy the correct cable. If you need more wheels, buy correct wheels. If your kill switch is bad and you just want to shut it off, don't buy one of these. Buy a legit kill switch. They're not that expensive. Saving a couple dollars today could potentially cost you a whole lot in the future in medical bills or property damage or who knows, anything else. Maybe you just destroy the mower in general. Maybe that's like the best case scenario. I'm going to leave you at that. Follow me on Instagram, SmallEngine101. If you like what you see, keep watching. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you've seen some briggery that just irritates you, then leave a comment below and then we'll gather a nice list, let's put it that way. I'm going to throw in one more. Something that also really grinds my gears is when a recoil rope breaks and then you tie it and then it just kind of sags there because it broke. That should normally be wound up. So then, yeah, it's just a giant pain. Replace the line. That was a bonus one for you. I'm going to go ahead and get this finished and put it back to normal working condition. I'll catch you in the next video. Have a good night.